Matt Yuricich was from high school age. He went right into the Navy right after Pearl Harbor. He graduated in 1941, I believe, from Lorraine High School in Ohio, which is my same hometown, but I didn't know his family. I came to be his apprentice decades later. But he was a graduate, a Bachelor's of Art graduate, and he was out here in Los Angeles. Actually, during World War II, he was in the Navy, and he went, fought in the South Pacific, but he did attend some of the USO and the different Navy functions here in Los Angeles, and became friends with Betty Grable. And she was a 20th Century Fox star, and it was through her that he was permitted to visit and go to 20th Century Fox studio lot when he moved out here after World War II. Because he went to college when he went back from World War II. He went back to Ohio and went to Miami University, and then came to Los Angeles and started working in the movie industry around 1950 at 20th Century Fox as an assistant artist, which is the way that, and in fact, I started through an apprenticeship also through the union back in the day. There was actually a matte painters union in those days, and his first few years were at 20th Century Fox under the supervisor Fred Serson, and the matte painting supervisor was a man named Emil Cosa. But they had a big department filled with talented artists and cameramen, and there are group photos of them. And in fact, the famous photo that you might have placed in the catalog of Matthew Yuricich with Marilyn Monroe he was part of an intramural baseball team that 20th Century Fox had called the Marilyn Monroes. And that was a party, I believe, at her place. And there's other shots of the entire team of the different studio employees, along with Matthew, and their wives too, were there as Marilyn hosted it. And in the photo that you guys have, I don't know if you're including it in the catalog, but he's holding a autographed baseball of the entire New York Yankees. And it was Joe DiMaggio was her husband at the time in the early 50s. Now, from around 1954, there was a layoff of artists for a period of time at 20th Century Fox, and many of them got hired almost immediately to go over and become part of the matte department at MGM Studios. And Matthew followed one of the other matte artists, Lee LeBlanc, who became the matte painting chief at MGM Studios in the 50s, and Matt was there at MGM from about 1954, I think. Seven Brides for Seven Brothers was one of the first matte painting jobs that he worked on there. But he worked through the late 50s, including Ben-Hur and North by Northwest, and a lot of classic films going into and including the 1960s. I think around 1965, he worked on Ice Station Zebra. It was a little bit later. But he stayed at the MGM matte department until they closed down in the late 60s and then went freelance. Yeah. Matthew was carried over from the Douglas Trumbull Company Entertainment Effects Group, and that was a company that was owned by his younger brother Richard Yuricich and Douglas Trumbull. And Matthew transitioned from EEG, and Ghostbusters was one of the earliest Boss Film projects that he worked on. Boss Film came into the same facilities that was EEG. Richard Edlund had moved away from Industrial Light and Magic after some differences, or just as he felt it was time to move on. So he signed some sort of an agreement with Douglas Trumbull and Richard Yuricich, and EEG eventually became Boss Film. And he converted a lot of the equipment and redesigned some of it, but it started out with mostly the 65mm equipment that was used on the earlier projects.